The magnificent writer Toni Morrison said, "We die. That may be the meaning of our lives. But we do language, and that may be the measure of our lives." I am a lover of language. I love words. I love what they mean. I love how the meanings shift depending on all the layers of context. I love how they sound. I love the way words can be distilled down and down to their essence, and how they can be moved around on a page, and how they can become a poem. Of course, not all poems are on a page. Some might be written on a rock or painted on a brick wall. Some may never be written down, only spoken. Some may be sung. But the connecting tissue is that the words were chosen with extreme care. They were selected and put one next to the other with great intention. The French poet Paul Valéry once said, "Poetry is to prose like dancing is to walking." Or, as I once said to a group of fourth graders I was teaching, poetry is to prose like lemon drops are to lemonade. They are stronger, more intense, more efficient, more concise. You can drink a big glass of lemonade and not get the punch of one small lemon drop melting in your mouth. Don't you just love the way a poem can say what you've been thinking or what you've been expounding on in just the right way, with just the right words? Mary Oliver saying, "The soft animal of your body." Or Wendell Berry saying, "I come to the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief." Or the description of a horse in James Wright's poem, Blessing. "Her mane falls wild on her forehead, and the light breeze moves me to caress her long ear that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist." I was trying to remember what was the first poem that really impacted me. I was read to a lot as a child, and poems for children were part of that. Probably a lot of Ogden Nash and Robert Louis Stevenson. The value and meaning were sinking into me even if I didn't know it at the time. Then, when I turned 11, or maybe 12, I remember becoming aware that words could have a very deep effect on me. The turn of a phrase, the description of a thing. I remember the description of dandelion wine as, quote, "summer on the tongue," unquote. I remember the revelatory shapes of words on the page and no capital letters of E.E. Cummings. I remember a poem about watermelon that I heard at an early age and I can still recite. "Yum, yum, mush, rich red fruit, dribble down your bathing suit. Then you go back to the pond." How great is that? A whole summer's day comes flooding into my memory. The hot sun, the juicy melon, the cold water of the pond. Academia almost knocked the love of poetry right out of me. The overly intellectual dissection of poems in college taught me how to find signs and meaning where there probably weren't even any, but I got an A on the final exam. It was in my late 20s and all through my 30s that poetry made a comeback for me, and its place of importance still remains. Finding language for the emotional intensities of my 20s was a gift. And then I became a mother, and I started to live through other intense, life-changing things: losing friends, divorce, dying relatives, the deep, sometimes cataclysmic changes of life moving all around me. Poetry was the place I could go to listen to myself better, to understand the world better. As we continue to shelter in place, which, by the way, is a much more poetic way to say quarantine, many of us may find comfort in poetry. We may see and hear ourselves in the words. We may be moved to write down some of our own. I hope that this service may remind you of the power of poems, the glory of language, in the community we feel when we speak them, and listen to them together.
After days of cloud and fog, sun rises from the horizon as if from the cave of the earth, rises as a poem rises from the body, illuminating stark trees, intensifying the poinsettia, the piano, touching all things inside and out. The sun connects my skin with a radiant world. Light is within me that my life walks away from. How much longer will I stand in my own shadow? The sun breathes light, excites the morning wind, sees everything like a god. The sun touches a curtain and flowers bloom out from the cloth. A dead weed dances orange-hued and pines turn rich, luminous, as everything together in the yard, the house, eases up from winter, turns to the east.
Why my hope I cannot say, except that it grows in the cells of my skin. In my envelope of mysteries, it hums. In this sheet, so akin to the surface of the earth, it whispers. Beneath the wail and dissonance in the world, hope's song grows until I know that with this turning, we put a broken age to rest. We who are alive at such a cusp now usher in 1,000 years of healing. Winged ones and four-legged, grasses and mountains and each tree, all the swimming creatures, even we, wary two-legged ones, hum and call and create the changing song. We remake all our relations. We convert our minds to the earth. In this turning time, we finally learn to chime and blend, attune our voices, sing the vision of the great magic we move within. We begin the new habit, getting up glad for 1,000 years of healing.
Good to see the green world undiscouraged, the green fire bounding back every spring. And beyond the tyranny of thumbs, the weeks, and other co-conspiring green genes ganging up, breaking in, despite small shears and kill mowers, ground gougers, seed eaters. Here they come, sudden as graffiti. Not there and then there, not there and then there, naked, unhumble, unrequitedly green, growing as if they would be trees on any unmanned patch of earth, any sidewalk cracked, crooning between ties on lonesome railroad tracks, and moss, the shyest green citizen anywhere, dreaming between bricks on the damp side of a shack. Clear a quick swatch of dirt and come back sooner than later to find the green friends moved in, their pitched tents, the first bright leaves hitched to the new sun, new roots, tuning the subterranean flavors, chlorophyll setting a feast of light. Is it possible to be so glad? The shoots rising in spite of every plot against them. Every chemical stupidity, every burned field, every better home and garden finally overrun by the green will, the green greenness of green things growing greener. The mad earth publishing her many million murmuring unsaids. Look how the shade pours from the big branches, the ground, the good ground, public, pubic and sweet. The trees, who are they? Their stillness, that long silence, the never running away.
As always, I'm so glad to hear a poem from Nancy Pulley. Her imagery is so vivid, I feel as if I've just been in her living room with the sun coming in and touching the things she sees. After days of cloud and fog, sun rises from the horizon as if from the cave of the earth, rises as a poem from the body. And the poem, 1,000 Years of Healing, is typed on a piece of paper that I have scribbled on. It's been floating around my desk, my art room, pinned onto bulletin boards, removed. It's been traveling in my world for some time. It's one I keep turning to because when the poet says, "We who are alive at such a cusp," I think she means all of us, all the time. And the last one is about one of the things I love the most, the improbable force of plant life, especially the weeds. They just grow and grow. He says the greenness of green things growing greener. That poet is not worried about overusing a word. These stories, feelings, images lift me up. They lift my spirits. They flood my psyche with hope. They give language to things I've been thinking about in this time of COVID-19. When waves of uncertainty wash over me with the fears and what ifs of the future, I welcome the grounding of these poets' visions, and I'm nourished by their words. As I was thinking about what I would say today, I sat in my living room with books of poems all around me, some opened to a favorite, many tagged with scraps of paper, so many poems, so little time. I read so many that were just so good, so well made and so evocative. And I think that poet must know me. I was overwhelmed with gratitude. I had an image of being at the water's edge, and the poet pulls up in a beautiful handmade wooden canoe and says, "Get in." And I do. And we push through the water and they take me out. When this service is over, or maybe tomorrow, or in a couple of days, get out your poetry books. If you don't have any, call me. I'm serious. I do home delivery.
More like a vault, you pull the handle out, and on the shelves, not a lot, and what there is, a boiled potato in a bag, a chicken carcass under foil, looking dispirited, drained, mugged. This is not a place to go in hope or hunger. But just to the right of the middle door shelf, on fire, a lit from within red, heart red, sexual red, wet neon red, shining red in their liquid, exotic, aloof, slumming in such company, a jar of maraschino cherries, 3/4 full, fiery globes like strippers at a church social. Maraschino cherries, maraschino, the only foreign word I knew. Not once did I see these cherries employed, not in a drink, nor on top of a glob of ice cream, or just pop one in your mouth. Not once. The same jar there through an entire childhood of dull dinners, bald meat, pocked peas, and see above boiled potatoes. Maybe they came over from the old country, family heirlooms, or were status symbols bought with a piece of the first paycheck from a sweatshop, which beat the pig farm in Bohemia, handed down from my grandparents to my parents, to someday be mine, then my child's. They were beautiful, and if I never ate one, it was because I knew it might be missed, or because I knew it would not be replaced, and because you do not eat that which rips your heart with joy.
2 days, the wind has hurried last year's leaves down our road, past the point of seeing. I am safe here from forward motion, from the power that tosses a light, wild bird on branches of sweet gum outside my window. To be safe is not enough. To be still is the beginning. Wind moving across our landscape, fluting hollow rocks and sounding like the first day of the world. There is, after stillness, the way we turn towards the wind, how we may go out today among the leaves and wild birds, humming our own windy tune. There is the way we choose to breathe deeply, our lungs making us light as the goldfinch. Something bright and musical keeps us here, fluttering, making brave movements in defiance of the wind.
There's a place where the sidewalk ends and before the street begins. And there, the grass grows soft and white, and there the sun burns crimson bright. And there the moonbird rests from his flight, cool in the peppermint wind. Let us leave this place where the smoke blows black and the dark street winds and bends. Past the pits where the asphalt flowers grow, we shall walk with a walk that is measured and slow, and watch where the chalk white arrows go to the place where the sidewalk ends. Yes, we'll walk with a walk that is measured and slow, and we'll go where the chalk white arrows go, for the children they mark and the children they know, the place where the sidewalk ends. Just over 2.5 years ago, which might have been 2 months ago, I don't know, but just over 2.5 real years ago, many of you were participating in a very different type of Sunday service. We weren't on Zoom. It was actually in the afternoon, and it was sort of a big to-do. If you don't remember, on November 12th, 2017, I was ordained and installed as the settled minister of this congregation. And during that special ritual and rite of passage, during that ceremony where we became bonded together as minister and congregation, we both received charges and encouragements about the journey we were embarking on together. Perhaps in a sermon soon, I'll reflect on the charge that was given to you all, to this congregation, from your first minister, the Reverend Roger Birchhausen, and your first settled minister, the Reverend Dennis McCarty. But today, I'd like to reflect on something that was shared in the charge given to me by my mentor, the Reverend Catherine Burt. I asked Catherine to give the charge to me as your new minister because I knew that of all my mentors, she knew me the best. And she said exactly what I needed to hear. The last thing she shared in her list of things to remember was to turn to the poets. I didn't realize how profound that and important it was to turn to the poets at the time. Really, I haven't considered it much until more recently, until during this pandemic when there's been so much uncertainty and uncharted waters to traverse. I went back this week to read her charge in full, and I'd like to share this section of it with you. She concluded her remarks by reflecting on her own ordination and saying, "As my mentor told me at my ordination, read poetry. Turn to the poets when you get stuck. The poets will help you with a different perspective and get you out of that logical mind which wants to control outcomes and see into the future. You are not in control, and your ministry will thrive if you can remember that always. So when you forget, turn to the poets." Well, if there was ever a truer statement than this about ministry and about this predicament we are in, I haven't heard it. I know at times over the past few months I have felt stuck. Many of you have felt stuck, or you feel stuck right now, stuck in your homes, stuck with the uncertainty and fear of how this pandemic will unfold. I've also come to understand that I truly am not in control and that I cannot see the future. Maybe this reality has come to you as well, or has taken on new meaning in the past few months. And so I'm grateful to my mentor for this reminder, and to this congregation for choosing to turn to the poets on this Sunday, as we do on many Sundays. I'm grateful for the poets of our congregation, for those self-described poets, and those who are poets without even knowing it. In the poetry that has been lifted up today, I can see, and more so, why in times of strife, in times of uncertainty, poetry can help us to find our way. For me, poetry speaks another language, not English or Spanish or Mandarin or Hindi. Poetry speaks a language of its own. It can be translated into English or Spanish or Mandarin or Hindi or any other language, but poetry at its essence is a language of a whole different sort. And this is as close as I can get to describing its meaning and power in my life. Poetry is the animation of words, of memories, of images and symbols, and of life itself. Poetry animates life. It adds rhythm and melody and sometimes dissonance to this mysterious life that we all share. It seeks to name the unnameable, to point us toward that horizon of our longing where our sense of connection and wholeness is beyond reproach. And poetry is something that is learned, that is discovered, really, not in any book of poetry, nor truly from anything beyond ourselves even, but rather poetry comes from within us. It is our first language, the truest language of love that is given greater shape and voice and meaning throughout our lives. I believe that poetry takes up residence with wonder and imagination, along with the other art forms and with nature as well. What a household and a dinner party that would be. I believe that poetry is sometimes best understood by children and by those of all ages who are willing to wonder and wander with imagination through this life. Shel Silverstein's poetry reminds me of this gift of wonder found in poetry. I remember reading his poetry a lot as a child and returning to it and to his drawings when I was sad or I felt alone. Where the Sidewalk Ends is one of my favorites, and I've shared it here before. But, like all poetry, it is hard to let go of the things that speak to us of the soul, from the soul, or through the soul. Perhaps I'm a romantic, or perhaps one needs to be a romantic to experience the language and gift of poetry. It is interesting to imagine what struck me at such a young age from the poem Where the Sidewalk Ends. I think its lasting message and defining impact on my life is found in its first sentence, which is a message of hope. Imagine that there is a place where the sidewalk ends and before the street begins.
I was alive. out
And imagine that in this place,
how much I love to read.
I think someone might be unmuted. And imagine that in this place, the grass grows soft and white and the sun burns crimson bright. And imagine as the sun sets and the dark of night takes hold over that special place, imagine if you could look up at a tree just there and see where the moonbird rests from his flight to cool in the peppermint wind. Imagine. You don't have to be a child to taste the peppermint of the wind. You may have to be a romantic, but you can be at any stage of your journey and experience hope rise up in you as sure as the warm morning sun. And I know it's hard during these times of uncertainty, even as the days are getting warmer and brighter, to find hope. But through poetry, there is a path for all, for everyone, for all of us to take. There's so much we don't know about how the next few months or the year ahead will unfold, but I know this. This I know because of listening to Shel's poetry as a child and as an adult. However it unfolds, we'll walk with a walk that is measured and slow, and we will get there together. Wherever that is, whenever it is, whatever it takes to get there, we will listen and we will move with one another and with imagination to that unimaginable place, poetically framed this morning as the place where the sidewalk ends. In the days to come, we will be driven to rush into rushed planning and quick answers about our way forward as a congregation. But perhaps the poets really are here for us, here with us. And if we turn to them, we may soften our grip on the need for certainty and for urgency, and find resting in our palms a flower of beauty and truth. There I go again, with being romantic. But truly, imagine what we can hold in our hands when it is not clenched, when it is instead outstretched, when we move not with logic alone, but with love and compassion, and with patience for one another in this difficult time in human history. Imagine. I am hopeful about our future, even now, even when I know so little and control so little. I am hopeful still because I am not alone. I don't have to know it all or control it all. We are all in this together, all of us, along with the poets, along with our ancestors, along with those who will follow after us. May we rest with confidence in this wisdom and presence of the poets, and never lose sight of that long foretold place, that special place, all those places where the sidewalk ends and just before the street begins. Hold close, my friends. May it be so, and amen.